Hello and welcome to States of Matter, the podcast from the Institute of Refrigeration's Women in RACHP network, the show where we explore the diverse and dynamic world of heating, cooling, and the incredible women who keep it moving. I'm Lisa Jane Cook, and this is our first episode without the amazing Karen Perry at the helm. Karen, if you're listening, we missed you already. But fear not, I'm joined today by the brilliant Amy Gittos, a long-standing member of our committee and a true champion of this industry that we all love so much. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Lisa. You're right.
In this episode, we're thrilled to be joined by Denise Gladding. Denise is HR and Executive Support Manager at Lightfoot Defence, and she brings a wealth of experience not just in human resource, but in supporting teams and businesses through change, growth, and all the challenges that come in working in a fast-paced technical industry. We're looking to explore Denise's career journey today. We're going to pick into her insights into the world of HR and what it takes to build a supportive and inclusive high-performance workplace, something that's critical to the ongoing success of our sector. So without further ado, let's get on with it. Denise, can you share a little with us about your career and maybe something about you personally as well, if you don't mind?
Yeah, not at all. Thank you for having me. My career path, I was never in HR. I didn't start out in HR. I used to work in street lighting, bizarrely. So I was a street lighting designer working for one of your big corporate energy companies. And yeah, literally walked the streets and pinpointed on a map where every lamppost was going to be positioned. And that is basically go back to the office and then redesign the actual position on using AutoCAD. And then obviously the guys would go out and install the new lamppost. So that's where my main career path started. But towards the end of that, I very much got involved in HR. I really enjoyed it. There was just so many aspects to cover. It was never one day was the same, whereas the street lighting career was. So I just liked the different subjects you could get involved in, some obviously very difficult to manage. So yeah, then basically the MD at the time sort of was watching my career path and they put me on a course to do my level 3 HR. And I found it quite easy because I'd spent years involved in the HR anyway. So it was quite easy to do. But then during lockdown, I actually started my level 5 diploma. And that was really intense. So that was hard. And even now, my employers would like me to do my master's, but I'm not ready to do that yet. When I look back at my diploma, although we were in lockdown and you sort of think, right, I'm working from home, sort of the first 8 weeks, it was very intense. There was a lot of work goes into it as I've got a family to look after. I was working full time as well. The nights I spent up till, 1, 2 in the morning was just immense. So it was quite difficult. So I'm not in any rush to do a master's. So yeah, so I'm now sort of full time in HR and absolutely love it. Love meeting the people, working with all the different people and their different personalities and, monitoring how they deal with things and being asked for advice. Yeah, absolutely love it. So I've got a partner that I've been with for 14 years. I have 2 children. Well, they're not children anymore. 2 grown-up girls. One's 25, one's 21. Yeah, that's me really. And a little dog who's my hero.
How have you found that, Denise, then, balancing kind of work with life? Obviously, you've spoke about the fact that you've got a family. Have you found that difficult to manage?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a very strong character. I do know that. Years ago, I was married, I was divorced. So I did effectively bring up 2 children on my own. Yeah, it's tough. But I think, as you just learn through life how to cope with things and how to, I'm very organized anyway. It was like a military operation when my girls were in school. I know what it's like trying to get children out the house first thing in the morning, to get to work on time. So yeah, it's difficult. I've got a good support network around me and did have back then as well. So you've got that support network around you, whatever occasion you're going through, it just makes it that so much easier. So I was lucky. I'm obviously aware there are a lot of people that don't have a support network.
Do you find it difficult to separate your own experience with your kind of HR role, I guess my point is that the legislation that government has in terms of parental leave, etc., and support for parents isn't fantastic.
No.
But obviously, having lived through that, do you find that you have a struggle with the balance of kind of putting your HR hat on and knowing what's good for the company,
Yeah.
and then what could be potentially better for the employee?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from an HR perspective, anyone that's looking for parental leave, you've got to consider it. And I think if an employee is sort of demonstrating to you that, look, I need this time to be able to do this, but they're coming to you with, a solution as to I can, one, make this time up, or I could do this from home when the children have gone to bed or something. So, there's swings and roundabouts. And I think employers have to be very, adaptable, more so now. If an employer is seen as not, even considering it, then detrimental to the business. I think employees have rights now. It's just, and I sort of think back to, years ago when I was obviously working full time, two small young children. If I didn't have that support network around me, I don't know how I would have managed, whereas now it's a lot more flexible and people are a lot more understanding. I think employers here are anyway.
Have you seen a detrimental impact where, not necessarily in your current role, but I guess that you've spoken with other employers and how they've reacted to certain requests for flexible working? And have you sort of seen that detrimental effect on the business for being inflexible with employees?
I've never come across it, no. So I'm very much anyone that's sort of looking for that flexible work. I mean, here we're very flexible. We've got guys that are obviously doing training courses. So, and we actually kind of force them to work from home so that they're not interrupted. The employees that, you're doing this course, it's a benefit to us as well, because it's a qualification that they're going to gain and utilize in their work. And so we would, support them working from home, shut themselves off and, get your course done and get the time to sort of study that you need. And yeah, it's just what we do really. So I've not come across it ever sort of being a detriment on both sides anywhere yet.
From my personal experience as well, I think having children is kind of a taboo subject when you want to kind of promote women in engineering or women in refrigeration, etc. I kind of don't want to talk about it because it kind of feels like not that I'm using it as an excuse for wanting flexibility. It's like, oh, I need a helping hand here to sort of push me through. Do you find that within Lightfoot Defence that it can be a bit of a taboo subject, or have you sort of built a culture around that inclusivity and ease of conversation?
It's quite an easy conversation to have, but bear in mind that within Lightfoot, there are only 2 female employees. Equally as well, we have a lot of male employees that have younger children. Yeah. So, although we have to be equal in the respect of, if a male, for example, needs time off to look after children, then so be it. We have to honour that and have a workaround in place. So there are more and more women in well-paid jobs now, moving up the corporate ladder. So and some men are having to look after the children at home. So it works both ways. But I completely understand from, how difficult it can be, though, if you've got a young family, you're trying to work full time. So yeah, it's difficult, but there's always a solution.
Do you have any recommendations for kind of do's and don'ts in terms of a employer's perspective when sort of interviewing candidates around speaking to them about their personal situations? I ask because I've got a bit of an anecdotal story where I was asked once in a job interview how I was going to manage my family life around my work, and my response was, well, you wouldn't have asked my husband that.
I mean, it's just a no-no. So,
Yeah.
there's, it's not something that we would ever ask in an
Mhm.
interview here. Every interview I've held here, I ask the same question as you've asked me at the start here, tell us a bit about yourself. But I tend to look at it, or I will ask the question because whoever else is interviewing with me, they pretty much want to know about their qualifications, their experience, what they can do, from a mechanical kind of aspect. Whereas I'm interested in the personal side. So I want to know what their family life looks like, but without them sort of feeling that they're going to be, if I turn around and say I've got 6 children to look after, So yeah, I'll ask the question and tell me a bit about yourself, but your personal life, not your career path. So, what does your home life look like? So it's easier to answer that way.
Mhm.
Yeah, there are certain questions you shouldn't ask in an interview.
Definitely not.
But not a lot of people know that, certain questions not to ask.
It's really interesting actually. The employer that I'm with now, when I had my interview, they interviewed me over Teams because it was during COVID. The office is 2.5 hours away. So I was like, I'm not sure if I want to drive, if we get stopped, what am I going to say? They're like, fine, we'll do it on Teams. They interviewed me and they said, we'd like to offer you the job. And I said at the end, you do know I have children, don't you? And they said, yeah, that's cool.
Mm,
It was just, for me, like Amy working in a sales technical role, it's always been something that we've been asked at interview. It is almost like that, where you're female, you must have children. How are you going to look after them and do this role? And I know, especially like in my career, all the jobs that I've had until now have been really inflexible. It's been, this is a sales role. You're expected to be here 5 days a week. You're expected to travel. You can't have time off to look after your kids. It just wasn't really a thing. And I'm not saying that if my children were ill that I couldn't go home, but it was always holiday.
yeah,
So
I
it's
know.
really nice to hear that things are changing. Like my children, like yours, are a lot older. So it's not really an issue for me now. When they're ill, I just put them into their rooms and that's it.
There's the paracetamol, there's your fluids. Yeah. So I know. And it's, you look back years ago, it was always the female that stayed at home and looked after the children while the man went out to earn the cross sort of thing. And it's just not like my mum and my dad doesn't get it at all. He's like, why are you working full time? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, because I got divorced, Dad, so I had to, somebody has to provide for these children. The only outcome was to work full time. So, and yeah, like I said, lucky to have that support network around me, but it's very difficult trying to instill into businesses that, it's no longer the woman stays at home and looks after the children. We are all out there working, as hard as, any male. And yeah, it certainly wouldn't be penalised here. Not on my watch anyway.
What I really like, or what I've taken from what you've said already, is you have a ability to reflect. You recognize your privilege, and it's clear that's really shaped your leadership as well. And I, like you, I was lucky. I do moan about the fact that my work was not very flexible. I had 6 weeks off with my first, and I breastfed for about 6 months.
Mm.
So it was really challenging. But my dad actually retired when he was 52. They shut our local military hospital and they said to him at 52, you're too old to redeploy. And my son was only a couple of years old then. So then at that point, I was lucky enough to have him at home that I could say, Dad, I really need you.
Mm.
But like you, I recognize a lot of people don't have that,
No.
and not only are both people working in a relationship or a home now, but people are working a lot later as well.
Yeah.
So the grandparents that we would rely on traditionally, they're still working now. So
Mm.
there is, or it feels like there's very much a shrinking support network for everyone.
Yeah.
It's really challenging. So I really like that. And like I said, that's what I've really taken from you, is the fact that you recognize your privilege and you have empathy for the position that other people are in.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I sort of look at my eldest daughter, she works full time from home. So, and she prefers to work from home. It suits her. I personally don't like it, but that's, everyone's own, way of working. I like to be around the people, but she does work from home full time. And I keep thinking about, what's going to happen one day when hopefully she has, children, how's she going to manage that? How's she going to work full time? Because, she has to, they're not in a position for her to give up work. So how will they manage that? And I'm already thinking, right, maybe then that's when I go part time or, but I'm now in a position to, if I wanted to be able to do that. So she then has that support network. But yeah, I'm very conscious of, I'm very lucky that I've had that support network, but there are a lot of people that don't. And, it's something to really think about.
That's the thing. We've all now got this forward thinking. I'm not so much worried about my children having children at the moment. I'm worried about where they're going to live. It's
with you.
Well,
coming home.
Telling me.
It's cheaper with you.
Everything is so challenging now. And, sort of we've talked about youth in other podcasts, but people look at them and say, oh, they're entitled, they want this and that. But I just, yes, they might have things that we didn't have when we were growing up, but they've got a really different set of challenges. And there is so much for them to think about. To buy a home is a really big commitment. To have a family is a really big commitment these days. Everything is just such a stretch financially. Let's say it's really nice to hear that you can support people in the way that you do.
Yeah.
So you've had a really interesting career. I'm going to sort of circle right back to your first job where you were talking about placement of these lampposts and the AutoCAD. Again, that's a really unusual job for a woman. Like how did you end up there?
Literally by pure chance. Okay, so I started. It was just a fluke job. Never thought I would ever get an interview or anything. So, but yeah, I started in the street lighting, and I was an assistant to start with, and then when I got more and more involved within the street lighting projects, they actually put me on an AutoCAD course. So I went to night school and did that. And then once that was complete, yeah, I just got really involved in obviously all the street lighting. So it was, but there was quite a few female designers. So yeah, which surprised me actually, because I sort of always looked at it and thought, oh yeah, that's when I did my AutoCAD course at night school, it was all male. So I was the only female, and I had to draw this screw going into it's a really weird drawing, like a screwdriver being drilled in. So, I was just like, why am I drawing this? But, that's part of the course, you had to do it. But yeah, I was the only female on that course. I was thinking, but we've got, 6 designers on our team, but all female. So, odd one really. I just fell into it by chance. So, and then as, the years go by, you sort of get involved in other aspects of me with HR. So
it's really obvious you've got a thirst for knowledge as well. You want to learn, you want to grow, you're always sort of looking to develop yourself, because I think if you weren't, you probably would still be doing that now. You would have just been satisfied with that job and got on with it. But you've obviously found an area that you're really passionate about. And the fact that you committed to doing your qualification during COVID as well. I mean, you talked about the pressures of that. I'll be honest, I think most of us were hanging on by threads at that point, because working in the industry that we're in, nothing stopped. If anything,
No.
it probably got a lot worse for a while, because, everybody went crazy at supermarkets, the vaccine storage, things like that. So to accept a challenge like that, incredible. Like, you must be really driven.
Yeah. To be fair, it's the one thing I'm quite proud of, because it was so difficult. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I spent moments throughout that journey in tears to my partner, saying, "I can't do this. I can't. I feel like I need matchsticks to open my eyes or keep them open." I was, my Saturdays and Sundays were taken up by, or Saturday evening and then Sundays were taken up by, writing 6,000 word, essays, so to speak. It was just, And then when you hand it in and they come back to you and say, oh no, you failed on that bit, oh, for goodness sake. So you have to read it, but they let you, they advise you on what parts you sort of need to redo. But yeah, it's a lot. And, when you've got, obviously at that time comes, teenagers at home that, it was tough. So hence why, as much as I would love to do my master's, but I don't think I'm ready to do it yet. So I've just got too much going on at work, at home, so I know I wouldn't be able to give it the full attention. So I'm not going to commit to something unless I can see it through, really. But yeah, it was tough. So I like my evenings to myself, and I like to, when I sort of skip out the door from here, I'm sort of heading home, and then it's like I've very much learned through COVID how to separate work and home life, and it's the first time I've ever done it in my whole career. It's been a real eye opener. So, but it's COVID was a bit of a benefit. Or that era was a benefit because I obviously changed jobs. I didn't have all the traveling anymore. I was living out of a suitcase 3 days a week, every other week, because my partner, who I'm with now, we actually met at where I previously worked. So both of us, one of us was away every week. So we had to alternate our working patterns so that one of us was at home with, my girls. So, but yeah, it's a memorable time doing that diploma.
Okay, yeah, I just can imagine how tough it was. The thought of doing something like that myself. I always think that, next year I'll have more time, and then I get to the next year and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to do anything like that this year. I don't know how people do it. I really don't.
No, I don't.
So you had a really interesting career. Is there one point that really stands out as a highlight for you, or two or three? Just what have been absolute milestones?
Oh, excuse me. I think my milestone was completing that and passing it because of the amount of hours that I put in. So it wasn't, my previous job wasn't just a 37-hour week. It was all the traveling involved on top of that. If I could work 37 hours, then great, but it wasn't. It was like 45, 50-hour weeks, so it was intense. So for me to actually complete a diploma in that as well, that is my biggest achievement, I would say, from my career. And I'm just so glad that I did it because it has opened up so many other doors. So, and even outside of work, I have, my daughter's friends will come to me and say, look, this has happened. Is this right? Or how do I do this? And I'm very much, when I'm advising my girls on certain scenarios, I'm doing it in a tactful mum HR way now more. So, whereas before they might have just got the mum response.
So a lot of companies don't have, I guess, decent HR people in place. A lot of the companies that I work with in particular are small family-run businesses that might have a couple of other employees on the books, etc. Is there anywhere that they can go for advice if they don't feel that they have been treated properly, or B, need something impartial to talk to about particular HR policies that they may want to question?
Yeah, so I mean, you can always, obviously, you can always go to your citizens' advice. You've got ACAS, which is online. I'm trying to think. ACAS is very good. So there's lots of support services out there. Sorry, there's one I'm going to look at on my phone because it's really useful, and you could just download the app. Just find it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking from a perspective, the industry is very wide and varied in terms of the nature of the companies that are involved. You've got some big corporate companies who've got HR people on standby, and making sure everything is done correctly. But I'm sure that there are some smaller businesses out there that maybe feel a little bit lost in terms of what best practice looks like.
So I mean, I would have said a small practice. I'd recommend ACAS as your first
Hmm.
port of call. You'll get a lot of advice on there. So there are lots of HR companies that you can subscribe to. So, there's absolutely, loads online that you can get information and access to. You can even go on your government website.
Mm.
So you'll get a lot of information off there. So, but yeah, ACAS, I would say, is your first port of call. So I'm trying to think, it's going to bug me now, the name of this app. I bought the wrong phone. I've got my work phone down here. No, it's on my personal phone. Yeah. But you will find, I mean, to be fair, it's like here, when I first started here, they didn't have a dedicated HR manager.
Mhm.
So it was, somebody else who has, some HR experience were doing it. And, and it wasn't until, because I never came here as an HR manager, I was business support. So it wasn't until later down the line that they sort of, started utilizing the fact that I do have a diploma in it. So, and more things that they wanted to do or change or dealing with people. It was, hang on, you need to do it this way. This is the correct procedure, blah, blah, and looking at some of their policies and procedures in place, just reading through them and with my knowledge, giving them the advice, look, we need to adjust these because some of them aren't quite correct. So, just over probably within the first year, they obviously highlighted, look, you're the best person for this. So we need to expand your role. I was very fortunate to have two roles.
Yeah, I'm a big believer personally that the people are the heart of business, and you need to kind of get that right, and everything else, the what's the old saying? It's look after the people, and the people look after you, type thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So I suppose Amy raises a really good point about smaller companies that perhaps don't have dedicated HR. So if I flip it, if you're running the company and you want to have a look at your policies, or maybe you just want to stay up to date with how the law's changing and how that might impact you as an employer, is there somewhere that you can go to that might be good just to keep you up to date? Or, are there any,
Yeah. So you've got ACAS, you've got CIPD website you can look at. You've obviously got your citizens advice and your government.gov.uk as well. So, but CIPD are very good. That's the Chartered Institute of Professional Development. They will have a lot of information on there. So, there are a lot of companies out there that you can subscribe to that they will give you all that information and be, you'll
you
get
can have
reminders of,
support?
this is a change and make sure it's implemented kind of thing. So I did my diploma with the CIPD. So, now I'm obviously involved with them. And you get lots of reminders there, and that they're reasonable, reasonably priced. So, but it's such it's worth every penny for a small business to sign up to.
Have there been
That's
any?
really
Oh, sorry, Lisa.
go on.
I was going to just ask if there's been any sort of recent changes to government legislation that's had a big impact on the way that Lightfoot are operating their business.
I wouldn't say anything's had a big
Mm.
impact. No. So it's very well run here. So
Mhm.
that we obviously I made a few changes to certain policies, and I've brought new ones in that they didn't have. So, but with regards to legislation, they were never out of date or anything. So
And
there you go.
you talked about the variety in the roles. So obviously you must get involved at all different levels of the business. But I'm curious to know what brings you the most joy about the job that you do.
The most joy. I guess it's watching people when just watching people develop and utilize the skills that we maybe specifically have invested in them, and then watching them pass that on, so we have apprentices here, and when you sort of apprentices can be very young. Okay, I mean, we're talking 16, 17, very naive, and you know we've watched I've sort of seen our apprentice sort of lose the attitude, so to speak. Okay, and he, develop into a really, polite young man, and is just watching him learn so much. And it doesn't matter who he goes to and what age they are that he goes to, he's really invested in getting as much information out of them as possible. So we've got all different age groups here. So, and yet every single one of them, they go out of their way to help younger people. So, and it's really lovely to see. And, just setting up regular, sort of just one-to-ones with them, and finding out, is it, everything okay? What do you need training on? What can we implement? What do you think's the best way, to go about this? And, just watching their journeys, I think that gives me a real, sort of satisfaction, really. I would hate for an apprentice to get at the end of their course and then just hand their notice in and go somewhere else. I want them to stay. I want this to be the place that this is where they want to work, beyond their qualification. So, and I think we've certainly demonstrated it here so far. So, and it's quite nice to be involved in it, moving forward. So we've implemented a mentorship program at the moment. We've got 2 people on. So we're calling it a fast track mentor program. So, which lasts for a year. So it's a lot of work for them to do as well, in addition to their actual role. But what I've seen so far, and obviously, they get homework as well, so, and the nice thing about it is we've got currently 2 people on this fast track program. One person is married with young children. One is just lives at home with mum and dad. So, and you can sort of just watching them both thrive in these programs, and, how they allocate their time, because obviously you imagine the person who has a wife and young children, he's got a family to look after. How is he going to manage that time? So, because of, and, but he's got, again, a support network round him, so, and it's, constantly will remind him, say, shut that door, and headphones on, then, it just gives you an hour, so to speak, where you're not interrupted. You can do this. Okay. And then, like the younger person, he's thriving as well, doing work from home. So, it's just nice. It's nice watching them all grow. So
I used
I
to
really
say,
like that.
sorry, Lisa.
Right.
Yeah, I know. I do. I had experience with apprentices and training programs, and there is nothing more satisfying, I don't think, than seeing a person get to the end of an apprenticeship and have that sense of achievement.
Mm.
Really, really something that I had a lot of value out of, and realised, people can talk about their own success stories, but actually it's watching success in other people that often brings the biggest joy in life for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's lovely to see. So, I mean, just here is the first time I've been involved with apprentices. So, it's actually it's a breath of fresh air, to be quite honest with you. It's the nice thing was watching him learn how to. Weirdly enough, this is just life in general, but watching him, his personality change from this cocky 16-year-old, okay, with an attitude problem to where he is now. I'm just like, oh, he's just so lovely to work with. It's unbelievable. But he's come straight from school, so it's like, that's all they knew back, that's all he knew was his, school life, going home to mum and dad. So, he's not worked anywhere else. So now he's having to work with all different age groups, who will sort of rein him in if he's, not doing anything or doing something he shouldn't be, or he's got an attitude. You know what I mean? They will turn around to him, or did turn around at the start and say, oi, wind your neck in, sort of thing. But and now he's so polite to everybody. It's he's a real joy to work with.
I think it's so interesting, actually. One of the things that I've really thought about recently is how school isn't really gearing people up to go into the workplace anymore. So, I mean, the whole concept of school back in the day was to get people to work in factories and conform, etc. But I remember, and she won't mind me mentioning it, but we had an apprentice who joined when she was about 18, and she was too scared to go to the toilet.
Bless her.
Yeah, and you just think, actually, like, that's what's been drilled into her at school, is that you need to ask for permission. And they're not. I don't think that schools are setting children up to be successful anymore.
It's really interesting. Again, I've spoken about it before. I'm a big advocate of apprenticeships. I started my fridge one late. So I think I was 19 when I started, but I still had that attitude and I still lived at home with my parents. And where we are, when I was at school, going into an apprenticeship was a really normal route. We've got a massive helicopter yard, or it was very big in the 80s and 90s. We've got the dockyards. There's lots of different like manufacturing out the way. So it's, it was a really big thing. But these days, it really isn't something that they encourage children to do at all. Everything is, which college are you going to go to? Which university are you going to apply to? It's so driven towards that.
Yes.
That educational route that actually, okay, there are some careers that really do need that route. So, I don't want a surgeon who's just having a go kind of thing. I want someone that's been to the medical school and done that. But there's so many trades out there that actually benefit from having that hands-on experience at the beginning. But our education system isn't pushing that at all.
No, I agree. I think they're very much gearing towards, right, you leave school, but then you join sixth form. You have to do 2 years there unless you have got an apprenticeship to go to. So, but yeah, so you've got to stay in sixth form and then obviously look at, right, from there, what college are you going to go to? And then what university are you going to go to? So, it seems like the first, from the age of 16 up to, the next sort of 5 years, what are you going to do? And it's not geared towards, right, you leave school and you get an apprenticeship. So I think maybe then we would have a bit more uptake.
Yeah,
I think
you've got to find an apprenticeship. So, but like you say, I don't think there are enough seminars, for youngsters to go to, or, that I just think when I look back to when my children were, looking at what career path, they'd already worked out in their own heads anyway what they wanted to do. But when we were going to like, sort of parents' evenings, or, they'd have like a seminar at school where you could go and talk to people about different, job aspects. But I just don't think it's great anymore. It's, it's bizarre, really. So.
And I think as well, like the opportunities for more experienced people to get into apprenticeships and retrain as well. I mean, I'm in my 30s, and the idea of starting something new now terrifies me.
I also think that the cost of the apprenticeship needs to go up.
Yes.
Well, that because I think that puts a lot of youngsters off, I think. Don't think they, it's, in my opinion anyway, as an example. So my youngest daughter wanted to go into paramedics. she wanted to be a paramedic. So she did 2 years voluntary. And then when we looked at the actual program, the salary was just so low. I was just, it's just unbelievable. And I'm like, yeah, and you've got to do this for how many years? And then, I'm just like, if you were, if you were a youngster and, say you don't have a home, so to speak, how would you survive? I don't know how they would. So, and I just think the salary needs a good look at, for any apprenticeship really. So I get it if you live at home, and everything's pretty much laid on for you. Yeah, that's just your spending money, isn't it? But not every youngster is in that situation. So, not everybody has that privilege or is that fortunate. I just think it should be a consideration when looking at apprenticeship salary.
I think it's a really interesting point, especially because we want to encourage, as Amy said, more experienced people to actually think about pivoting maybe and doing that apprenticeship. When I did my first apprenticeship, because refrigeration wasn't my first one, I was living at home. I think I was earning like £6,000 a year. So working 4 days a week at college one day, but I was living at home and my parents were providing everything. So that was more than enough. I think back then I might have been able to rent somewhere, probably a room somewhere and survived. But you certainly wouldn't today, not on the
No.
money that we're offering.
No, absolutely. I mean, the cost, you look at the cost of living now. So there's just absolutely no way anyone, in my opinion, would be able to afford their own place, and do an apprenticeship. That I just couldn't see it. So, which I think is a real shame because, if that may be the highlight for someone to actually apply for apprenticeship, make the salary, a bit more, favourable. So yeah, it's a difficult one.
It is. But I suppose I think I'm looking at it as well on the flip side. So you go to university, probably living away, you're going to have to get a part-time job and study for that course. And then you come out with a massive debt. Something I know Amy's got a bit of experience in. You referred to it as a tax, didn't you? So I think it's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah. So
Taxed for going to uni.
Definitely. So I mean, my background is not fridge. I went to obviously school. I did well. I really enjoyed physics and maths, but I was actually in a class, and so I wanted to do meteorology at university because we were down by the Met Office down in Exeter. So there was good sort of graduate schemes that went on there. And one of the conditions was that you had to do a physics degree. So they didn't want geography or anything like that. They wanted physics, which was fine. But I was in a class of 30 and there was 3 girls in my class. And we were made to sit at the back and I couldn't hear. So I did not do very well in my physics exams at A level. And it put me off. And one of the subjects that I really enjoyed doing was philosophy. And so when it came to it, I had no advice. There was no career advice given. There was no suggestion of, well, if you like meteorology, maybe you should go and do this instead. Maybe engineering might be good for you, or maybe something else might be good for you. So I just picked a subject that at the time I thought was quite interesting. And I find it quite embarrassing now. So talking about it and saying, oh, I've got a philosophy degree, because they talk about it as like Mickey Mouse courses, don't they? These days, like, go. But yeah, it's a tax. So I've actually just started my master's, stupidly, and it's not going to cost me any more than it's costing already. So I pay 9% of my income on anything over, I think it's £25,000, and it gets written off when I'm 45 because I'm on repayment plan 1, which was back in the early 2000s. So for me, I pay a couple £100 a month in additional tax, and I don't see it.
Mm.
So yes, I'm glad I went to university. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad I had the experience. I wish I'd chosen a different subject, knowing what I do now and how much I've actually enjoyed working in engineering and refrigeration. I think that's something that I would have preferred to have chosen. But I don't feel like it's costing me anything, realistically.
Yeah, the way they do it now is, I think it's very clever in how you're paying that debt back. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I think the fees are just astronomical.
Mm.
I can't process in my own head how you can charge someone, or the cost of that going to university and charging someone £9,000 to watch something on a screen, for example, like during COVID. How
Mm.
can they warrant doing that? That's just my personal opinion. My eldest daughter went to university. She did her first year. The second year, she moved back home. To be fair, she went to Guildford, so it was, she only had, I think, 9 lessons a week anyway, some of which she could do at home on, Zoom or Teams. So, it wasn't worth paying out for, accommodation and then having to get a part-time job to pay off, what she owes. So she just moved back home and did the last 2 years traveling back and forth to Guildford. So, she was fortunate to do that. But yeah, the cost of it is just unbelievable. She still does have a debt. She went to law school after that. So she still has a debt, but I'm just like, the cost of it, you're paying off goodness knows how long. But I like how the way they've worked it out is that it's only a percentage of what she earns now. And then as she gets a salary increase, they increase the percentage. So it's not, huge coming out of her salary, so that's kind of fair, but I'm still a bit dubious about the cost of those fees anyway. So
I definitely agree. I think there is a lot of room for improvement in education in particular. I feel like they need to review where the skills gaps and shortages are and basically give discounts on those courses, a lot like what they're doing in teaching at the moment, where you can get subsidies and funding to do certain subjects because they're lacking the skills within the industry. Unfortunately, I think that is a little too late, which is why I think the apprenticeship route is wonderful for people wanting to get more hands-on experience, because a university doesn't give you life skills.
No, and they're learning a life
Mm.
skill. Our apprentices are learning a
Yeah.
life skill whilst working here. So, and some of the things that they come out with, it's just, but obviously, I have to accept the fact that I'm a lot older, but sometimes I look at them and think, did you really just say that? Seriously, and some of the things that they just don't know, I'm just like, this is a life skill here for you, it's like, yeah, it's bizarre, but I just think the cost of the apprenticeship salary should be increased. And I think a lot of businesses would then gain a lot more apprentices. So,
I think, I don't know if you've got experience of it, Denise, but I know a lot of small businesses can get support for funding degrees through apprenticeship programs. So they're like the degree apprenticeships now,
right.
which essentially means that the business don't pay it and the young person doesn't pay it. It gets funded through the government. So I think things like that would be great for the future, because it gives that young person the credentials, as it were, where I know we've had lots of talk about this before, about whether it's important or not to have those credentials. Some people obviously do feel that it is important. So they get the experience, and it's not actually costing the business anything either. I think a lot of small businesses could really benefit from that. I know that
Yes.
that bigger businesses will be subject to a levy on it,
Yeah.
and they won't get with the funding. But definitely for small businesses, I think there isn't enough information provided about the availability of those courses.
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely.
So you mentioned sometimes like the apprentices come out with things that are a bit like, what? Um, have you got any funny stories? Not necessarily about your apprentices, maybe something that's happened to you. We always like to share a
Ultimately, what
funny
my
moment.
embarrassing moment. So,
Yeah.
I said what I was saying earlier. There's been so many over the years. I- I've got one I'll share that I was quite young. So before I obviously went into street lighting, I had an admin job at Crown Court, and I mean, we're talking back in the day when you used to write with a fountain pen, okay? And they even taught you how to write with a fountain pen at school. You don't even get that, can't even find them now. So, but I was an administrator at the Crown Court. So there I am, reading this case file, chewing my pen, as you do, and then completely oblivious to me, off I go. And I needed to file some of these cases away and press to get into the lift. Lift opens. I smile at the gentleman in front of me. He's all in his robes. He's obviously a judge somewhere. And he just looked at me really weirdly. And I was like, oh. So, and then he just said to me, he said, I think your pen has leaked in your mouth. I had fountain pen ink, literally. I must look like something out of Dracula. Okay. I've never been so embarrassed in my life. It was just everywhere. And then I don't even know, I didn't even notice it either. Because when I looked at my hands, it was all over my hands as well. Oh my word. So I was so embarrassed. Okay. But I think even more embarrassing was later. It must have been a few weeks later, I bumped into the same gentleman as well. Okay. And he just looked at me and went, nice smile. I'm never going to live that down, honestly. And I had the Mickey taken out of me at that workplace for so long. So, yeah, that's probably my embarrassing moment at work. So
That probably made his day, though.
yeah, I know. I no longer
Serious.
chew pens at all. Never put a pen in your mouth at all. So, yeah, he probably found it funny.
Yeah, I think, like I say, I think he has such a serious day that it probably just brightened everything up. And he probably still tells that story now, as
He probably sells, yeah. He will do, guaranteed. It's the look on his face when I walked in. I'll never forget it.
Oh, it's been really nice to talk to you today.
Yeah, both of you. Lovely to meet you both.
Thank you for joining us.
I've enjoyed it. So, yeah, it was not what I was expecting. So, yeah, it's been very relaxed and very easy to have conversations.
We like to talk, don't we, Amy?
Yeah, I love talking. Yeah.
We all do.
Thank you for listening to States of Matter, the podcast from the IOR's Women in RACHP network. If you'd like to listen to more of our episodes, you can find us on Podbean or on the IOR website. If you'd like to find out about the Women's Network, again, check out the IOR website or join our LinkedIn group. Thank you for listening. And thank you to Amy for co-hosting and Denise for being our wonderful guest.